Lapp, and I want to talk about some of the best practices for teaching English as a second language learner students. First off, it's most important to start with a positive teacher mindset. You need to remember that all of your students are capable of learning at high levels. Student achievement is very much affected by teacher expectations of success. So if you set a bar low for your English language learners, they're not going to be making high achievements. But you can set the bar high for your English language learner students, and we'll talk about some scaffolds and some ways to differentiate later on in this presentation. But it's very important to remember that your English language learners are coming into school with valuable experiences and with a high ability to achieve and to learn. So make sure that you're keeping your mindset geared that way, remembering that your students are capable of achieving just as much as your other students in your class. All right, so one way that you can help your English language learners achieve is by building their background knowledge. So remember, you need to find concepts and explicitly link them to the student's personal background. You need to think about what their experiences and funds of knowledge are. Remember that your students do carry valuable experiences and knowledge, even if it's different than what our culture seems to be here. So it's important to kind of lay out when you're reading a text some of the connections that you want your students to make. You want to link it to something that they might already be familiar with. You could also do a KWL chart or something like that in science or social studies to help them make connections between things that they already know. And it's also important to always really emphasize some of that key vocabulary before the lesson so that students are able to understand the content as you're teaching it. It's also important to remember that students may struggle with comprehending text or a new concept because their experiences don't match those of the culture in which it was written. Again, remember that you have to really build that background knowledge, so try to connect it to something that they may have experience with. If not, maybe you can tell them a story, maybe you can show them a video so that it makes sense and they can see a visual before they're reading that text. Maybe you'll have to explain a reasoning behind something too within a text because maybe that's not as normal in their culture. And again, make sure that you have your students feeling that their own wealth of experience is really important too. Make sure that you don't take away from all that they bring, all of the experiences and knowledge that they bring into the classroom, and give them chances to talk about it and to be the expert on their culture. It's also important as you're teaching English language learners to create a language objective. So the language objective, you're going to identify the key vocabulary. You're also going to determine the language function that's necessary for students to demonstrate their understanding. So what I mean by that is you may say students are going to write something from the content they're learning, or students are going to speak or say two things or identify certain vocabulary words. And these are all part of the language objective. So this is an area where you can really differentiate it for your students based on where they're at in their language learning process. You can still keep the content the benchmark level, and you still need to keep the content at a high expectation, but you can differentiate the language based on where the students are at in their language processing. Content objectives will go along with your language objectives, but they are something separate. So content objectives focus on the content that's being taught. And like I said before, you want to keep those standards high. You want to keep them at least the benchmark level for content. ELL students should still be learning benchmark level content. And you want to really focus on what students should know about the topic in your content objective. These are some more language functions that I think are important and can kind of help people understand ways to write a language objective and actually really help you in planning your lesson and really thinking about what do I want them to be able to demonstrate. So you can see over here in language arts, we have things like analyze, which would be a higher level skill, just like synthesize. Maybe you want them to explain, and maybe that could be in writing or that could be verbally. In math, maybe you want them to compare and contrast. Maybe, again, you want them to explain something. And explaining, again, it doesn't always have to be verbally. Maybe it could be in writing. Maybe it could be matching. Maybe it's drawing lines to match something together. Maybe it's showing their work on a whiteboard. So, other scaffolds and differentiation that you can use to help teach your English language learners include realia, visuals, videos, and lots of visuals and things that can help them become familiar with things that are different for them that they might not have heard of before, or things that can help them understand a concept. So, in the time that we're in, we're really lucky to have videos and all of the technology that we have so that we really can show students things in science, social studies, or lots of other subject areas. Realia means to bring in like actual props, which is also a great tool to use to help students understand different vocabulary. I love to use sentence stems and anchor charts and word walls for writing. We all know how important writing is for students, and I've really found sentence stems to be effective for learning how to do topic sentences or concluding sentences in elementary school. I've also found it helpful for citing text evidence, as that is a big deal now, especially for some of the state testing and just being able to reference different texts as well. Word walls are helpful, and these aren't even just helpful for English language learning students. These are really helpful for all students. They're able to see sight words and other vocabulary words with maybe a picture by them, and also to help them with spelling. And also, you can have students working in partners or in groups. Remember just to kind of use your common sense and be thinking kindly about how you pair these students. You want to have them with someone who possibly is a leader, and a student that you know will be working with them and not do anything for them, but will be patient and will also help them. I've also found it very helpful if you have bilingual students. Sometimes you can pair them with a student who is non-English proficient and who, still needs some things explained. I also highly recommend looking at the WIDA can do descriptors. So, after testing, especially in Colorado, we do access testing and it gives students a score in the WIDA can do descriptors. And it measures students listening, speaking, writing, and reading. And after you find out their scores in those different domains, then you're able to decide and see, what this student should be able to demonstrate for their level of language. So this gives you good ways to assess your students. There's all kinds of different ideas on the website based on their levels. Some students who are newer to English, particularly my kindergartners, I know some of the ways I assess them on some of their language skills is by pointing, by asking a question and having them point. This wouldn't be as appropriate for a student who's at a higher level in one of those domains. They need to be speaking or writing possibly. So this helps you find what really is appropriate in creating your assessments.